Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. I'm so thrilled today to have Blaine Oeklers here with me today. Blaine is the Chief Results Officer, the only one of its kind, I think, because you coined that term. And you have a really interesting background, a graduate of Purdue University and Stanford University's Social Entrepreneurship Program. You've co-authored 3 books. You're a TEDx speaker, a top LinkedIn connector, a habit master with a documented streak of 1,453 days in a row and counting. I'm sure that's outdated. As well. And I know I'm always looking for productivity hacks, how to do things. Blaine, thank you so much for being here.
Anika, thank you so much for having me on the show. Happy to be here and honored to be here. Honored to be able to share today, hopefully serve the listeners with some stuff about, how best to influence yourself. I really feel that's my calling. So I'm happy to share it any opportunity I get. And thank you for all the work going into these podcasts. You have to produce them and record them and put them out there for the world to hear. And I've listened to a bunch of yours. It's great. So if you're listening now, subscribe, and we're going to share some good stuff today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I always get so much out of these conversations that I can actually use as well, especially if I'm talking to somebody who's not in my specific area, right? Because I'm in marketing, PR, branding, but I'm always trying to find ways to be more efficient with my time. This is an issue that a lot of us have, is how do we be more productive, but without working 16, 17, 18 hours a day as entrepreneurs, especially if, I'm a single mom, I teach university, I have my full-time job, the podcast, other projects going on. So how did you get into this work of being the Chief Results Officer? Where did that path start? And how did you realize this was your calling?
Yeah, great question. And I had a few moments of dawning comprehension. So that's where the light bulb goes on and you're never quite the same again. And the first one actually happened for me in college. And so I went to Purdue University and I was there and I saw this little ad. And maybe like some of the listeners, I've always been like a seeker of knowledge. How could I get better? How could I improve? I saw this ad. I'm going to date myself a little bit. It was for an audio cassette tape. All right. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it. But there's an audio cassette tape for this abridged reading of this book called Think and Grow Rich. It's kind of a famous book, Think and Grow Rich. I sent away for it. Actually, it happened to be read by Earl Nightingale. He became one of my mentors. But I listened to this tape, then I bought the book and I read the book. And basically what I learned in college was that, and I made a little phrase called Waiteba. What you think about, you bring about. And it was kind of this aha moment that I could dictate how my life turned out by the thoughts that I held dominant in my mind. And now I couldn't change circumstance, but I could always change my reaction to circumstance, right? So it's not what happens that determines your life future. It's what you do about what happens. And so that's actually from Jim Rohn, who actually that's my number one mentor, is Jim Rohn. So that was the first moment. And that really brought me a lot of success, was just realizing that my thoughts kind of dictated, where I would go in life. I actually met my wife there. We've been married 31 years. And then the second moment of dawning comprehension, which put me on this path, was that I got a degree in computer science and I went to work for a company and I was on this long business trip. And I get back from this long business trip and there's my son, Bo. He's about 1 year old. And he's like giving me the cold shoulder. And I said, Beth, is Bo sick? Is something wrong? She goes, no, he's not sick, but you were gone so long on that business trip. Oh. He kind of forgot who you were. And I was like, wait, what? And so emotionally that hit me hard that night. And I remembered both my parents worked and sometimes my brother wasn't there. I'd come home to an empty house and I'd be scared. Anyway, all these emotions came. And so I made what I call a clarifying decision. That night I said, look, no matter what, I am going to become a work from home dad, no matter what. And when I clarified, when I got really laser focused on that, it took me a year. Okay. I'm kind of conservative. We had to save up money. And my wife is very supportive. She was like, if you can make as much money as you do in your full-time job from all this other stuff you're going to start, then we can do it. But we have to have 6 months living expenses, saved in the bank and all that. So I started 2 businesses and it took me a year, but a year later, I broke free from my job. And I broke free, and that was 27 years ago. So now my kids are grown and gone and left the nest, but I became this work from home dad. And so I worked from home, before it was cool to be a remote worker and have side hustles, I was doing that. But what happened then was I had no commute and I was working from home and I was running businesses that had no daily operations kind of on my part. And so it gave me the time to do some of that inner work, why am I here? And I realized that I'm here to help people take control of their lives by taking control of themselves, something I call self-fluence. And so I started doing that, helping people get results. I was doing it for mastermind groups. And this one mastermind group of attorneys, they're like, look, you're helping us get results every week. We're going to call you our chief results officer. And I go, I like that. That's like my identity. That's who I am. And so I went to the US Patent and Trademark Office and nobody had used that term. Yeah. So I was able to not just get not trademark it, but get the registered trademark. So the R with the circle around it, which has a little more power. But anyway, I was able to get that. So now, yes, I can say I'm America's only chief results officer, but I've been doing it now for a couple of decades. I really, really love it. And it's allowed me to figure out, I'm more like a nuts and bolts kind of, self-evident, thing. Like I can go into brain science and the reasons why it works, but I just like that it works and that it'll work for people. And so that's how I got to where I am. But over these last couple of decades, yes, we've developed a lot of frameworks to help people compress time, start new habits, eliminate bad habits, get rid of head trash, like all those thoughts those limiting beliefs and the head trash that really kind of holds you back from your full potential.
Yeah. And speaking of habits, I know there are so many books on creating better habits, right? There are Atomic Habits. There are journals that you can buy that are supposed to help you figure out the difference between being and doing and create better habits so that you're not always in that busyness phase of life. I'm in a book club where we listen to, it's a self-helpy book club. And every month we read a different book or I listen to it on Audible. And then the founder does a different podcast episode essentially for each chapter. And we go through all the exercises and stuff. And so there are all these tools that we can all use and implement, but I think it's still hard if you're not putting it into practice every day. And it's easy to get out of the routine of creating these new habits. So you have a few different techniques that you use. And I know one thing that you have is the 21-second habits, creating new habits in 21 seconds, not 21 days. Please tell us all about this. How do we do this?
Yes. This is one of my favorite frameworks. And in my introduction, you said 1,400 and something. It's over 1,800 days in a row now using this framework. Now, all the frameworks that we teach at Self-Fluence, that's the company that I ended up starting a couple of decades ago to help people. Everything you need is within reach, right? That's one. Mm-hmm. The second one is that you're already doing it. You already know how to do it. And the third is that if you decide, you can master it. Right? So everything you need is within reach. You don't have to buy something new. You don't need anything new. Everything you need is within reach. You're already doing it. You already know how to do it and you can master it. So in this idea of creating a new habit in 21 seconds instead of 21 days, let me ask you a question. Now, in the last 24 hours, have you brushed your teeth?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's a habit, brushing your teeth. How long have you had that habit?
Gosh, my whole life.
Okay, so your whole life. So we're not going to ask people's age, but decades. For decades, you've had this habit. So I want all the listeners to realize that you are a habit master. You're a habit master. You have habits that you've mastered completely, like brushing your teeth. And there's no willpower required. Most days you remember it unconsciously. It's wired in your brain, right? And so what I'd like to do is let me tell the story around how I discovered the 21-second habit framework. So my wife, Beth, luckily this is past tense. She used to have nearly daily migraine headaches. And it was like debilitating. And so we went to doctors, we tried all kinds of stuff. And finally, one doctor said, look, you've got to do this headache log. You've got to track stuff. And so I need you to fill this out every single day. And it has like, what did you eat? Like, what's the barometric pressure? What's the weather like? And all these different things about her day. And she could do it for a day or two, then she'd forget. Then she would lose the log, right? And then she'd have a migraine and I'd ask her about the log. Bad move. And so, but one day I'm watching her brush her teeth and I go, Beth, you are great. The dentist would love you because you are like 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes at night. You brush your teeth every day. No willpower required. That habit is hardwired. So the first part to the 21-second habit is what I call habit linking. I said, Beth, take the headache log, put it underneath the toothbrush. Now, you're never going to lose it because you know exactly where it is. But every day when you brush your teeth, you've got 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes at night, fill out the log, right? So big key is habit linking. You're linking to a habit that you're already a master at, right? So think about all the things you do every day. You get dressed, you have a cup of coffee first thing in the morning. There's all these things that you do that you can link to, and it's super powerful. And the smile on my wife's face when she went back to the doctor with 90 days in a row, the headache log filled out completely for 90 days in a row was spectacular. Now, she has a migraine like once every couple of months now, so it's very much under control. But anyway, that was a big win for her. So there's 3 keys to the 21-second habit. So the first is habit linking. Now, I said, and I'll give you the second key now, is that I said, okay, I want to try this. Like, what new habit do I want to start right now? And I had 2 new habits. I wanted to read the Bible. I wanted to do this Bible app. And then I also wanted to take a mind shower every morning. Now, I was taking physical showers to go in the shower shower, wash my body. But I realized that every day, just like my body was getting dirty, my mind was filled with dirt, with what I call head trash. Some of it was from news media, social media, sometimes from family and friends, sometimes from enemies, whatever, but there was all this head trash and I wanted to wash it out, right? So I wanted to take this mind shower. Now, there's a lot of cool apps you can use for that. I use Headspace, but there's an app called Calm, which is also good. There's an app called Abide, Insight Timer. There's lots of apps that could help you to kind of wash out your mind.
Right.
So now I had to say, okay, I know, from being a chief results officer, I know that doing things first thing in the morning is key. Like if I let it wait, I might not do it. So I said, okay, Blaine, what is the first thing you do every morning? No willpower required, that you do every single morning. And yes, you guessed it. It's my smartphone.
Yeah.
Every morning I open that smartphone without fail. And so what I did is on my smartphone, I moved all the apps off the home screen, except for the Bible app and the Headspace app. And what I did is I said, when I open my phone first thing in the morning, I have to do those two apps before I'm allowed to touch anything else. Right. And I've got 1,800 days in a row now. And this is where the second key. So the first key is habit linking. The second key is called urge surfing. So urge surfing is where you want to surf a desire, an urge to do something. You want to surf that urge to give you the energy to do that new habit. Right. So why did I open my phone first thing in the morning? Well, I opened my phone because I have all these red circles with numbers in it that I have this many text messages. My son lives in Denmark, so he texts me sometimes during the night. I've got emails from people that I want to know about. There is social media. There is news media. There is what orders have come in. There is my business. Like this whole, while I was sleeping, all this stuff happened and I want to know it. I want to see it. I want to jump into it. And so I surf that urge to push me to go do those things. Now, if I'm short on time, I still do them. Like I like a 10-minute mind shower every day. But if I'm short on time, I'll do a 3-minute mind shower. It's okay. I'm going to dial down the task to make sure that I kind of stay with it. So that's the second one, is urge surfing. And then the third key is leverage. So it's habit linking, urge surfing, and leverage. And what I mean by leverage is getting some leverage on yourself to do that new habit. Now, leverage, both sides work. What I mean by that is a reward. So you say, look, if I do this new habit for a week, I'm going to buy that new audiobook that I want. Right? Yeah. So give yourself a reward, some kind of reasonable reward for a reasonable number of days in a row, and then also a penalty. Right. So if I don't do this for a week, 2 weeks, a month, whatever it is, I have to pay a penalty. And a lot of times spouses or friends, they're happy to come up with the penalty. Right. They love it. Because the penalty has to be big enough that it's going to be motivating you. And it has to be big enough, based on how many days, right? Yeah. It could be bigger but the penalty, yes, the better people know you, the better they can craft that penalty. Right. Now, sometimes you won't agree to it because it's like too high. But my wife, she knows I don't like to wash the big garbage cans that we put out on the street. So she's like, Blaine, if you don't do that, then you're going to have to wash the garbage cans. But then when she takes it up a notch and she says, you have to wash the neighbor's garbage cans on the side where if you touch their stuff, they're coming after, right? So whenever she's done that, I've gotten the thing done. So anyway, but there's that leverage and the pain and the pleasure, right? The reward or the penalty. And then also psychologically, once you get 3 or 4 days in a row, you don't want to break that chain. Psychologically, there's a power to you keeping that habit. Now, we're all human, so it's going to happen. I'm on 1,800 and something days. Something's going to happen. My phone's going to fry, whatever. Something's going to happen, but that's okay. We're human. Then we start again. Right. And now we have a new thing to go for. Right. But getting that streak of a couple of days in a row. I'll give one more example is I love next day planning. And I had this one attorney friend of mine and she was like, Blaine, I want to plan my day, but I'm not doing it. And I said, and okay, habit linking, urge surfing, leverage. So what's the first thing you do in the morning without fail? No willpower required. She says, I have a cup of coffee. And I said, do you have one of those fancy machines that brews the coffee with the beans and it smells really good? She goes, I do. I said, great. Take a pad of paper and a pen, put it on top of the coffee maker. And I want you to brew the coffee, smell the coffee, but you can't sip the coffee until you start the plan for the day. Now, if you want to drink the coffee and make the plan, I'm okay with that. But you have to surf that urge for the coffee to get yourself to start the new habit, to do the plan, and then give yourself a reward, right? So if you do it for a week or a month, whatever you want, maybe a week, then, treat yourself to something nice. So anyway, that is the 21-second habits. And it is a hack, sort of, right? Because you're using the habit linking and the urge surfing to make it happen. So neurologically, the reason they say 21 21 days is because the neurons of your brain will begin to form in 21 days, but it takes 63 days for them to actually be where you don't even have to think about it. So if you can use the habit linking to get yourself to first pass the 21 days, but then past 2 months, you could use that new habit as a link to some other habit if you want, right? It becomes where it kind of runs on its own. And I have, kind of this a daily 7 habits that are kind of interwoven that all kind of run off of each other, which is nice.
Very cool. So you were talking about working with mastermind group, helping them learn these hacks. You got the name. How do you work with people now? Do you work primarily with groups? Do you work with individuals? What tools can people go onto your website and utilize? Yeah, tell us everything.
Well, so I work with a lot of mastermind groups of business owners, primarily business owners, but self-fluence works everywhere, but primarily business owners through mastermind groups. But one thing that I do that I love to do is something that I call a super results day. So Super Results Day, I do it 3 times a month. Super Results Day is where we come together on Zoom in the beginning of the day and we kind of map out the day. We do a little mind dumping and then we come back every 3 hours. We come back on Zoom and everyone kind of crushes their personal to-do list for that day. But then also the Super Results Day has a topic. So throughout the day, we meet 4 times, only for 30 minutes. But during that time, you're checking in for accountability, but you're also learning about something, right? Sometimes it's a day we have a declutter day. That's all the theme is, to declutter your home office, your house, your mind, your tablets, your phones, right? Other days, decision day. So it's a day where you're making all the decisions that you put off. So they all have themes, but that's probably one of the most favorite things that I do. And that's something that, if you get on my email list, you'll see when I'm having them and you could join in on any or all of those. That's the most favorite thing probably that I do. But I also write a lot of articles, post, on Facebook, and just try to help people get results just by pushing out frameworks and information and stories.
Awesome. What is one of the biggest hurdles that you find with business owners when you're starting to work with them? What are some of the main pain points that you see that you're able to help them resolve?
Yeah, you brought up the biggest one of all, which is overwhelm. The business owner can do anything, but they can't do everything, right? But they can do anything. It's their choice. So number 1 is overwhelm. And then number 2 is typically head trash. So overwhelm and head trash, it's the negative thoughts. Sometimes the voices are small, sometimes they're loud, and life hits you hard, right? And Rocky famously said, it's not about how hard you're hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, right? And so progress is key. And entrepreneurs, business owners, sometimes they tend to look at the gap between where they are and where they want to be and not turn around and look at the gain from where they came. Right? I think those are the 2 biggest areas. And we can break down some frameworks and some tools for that. But those are the 2 biggest things I see that business owners are suffering.
Yeah, I'd love for you to break it down. Or even if you have a case study you want to share with us about, you don't have to use names or companies or anything, or you can, whatever the comfort level is. But yeah, I'd love to hear about somebody who came to work with you and they were kind of all over the place, thinking about myself right now, like all the things I'm doing. And then how did you help them recreate their systems? And then what was the result?
Yeah. So one of the programs I have, it's called A Day Ahead program. So the A Day Ahead program is something where it helps people, mostly business owners, go from being a day behind on everything to actually being a day ahead. And so you go from like a day behind to being caught up to being ahead to being a day ahead. Now, I typically live in the a day ahead framework of life, meaning that when I wake up, I don't have any real to-dos for the day. Like I've done them all. I have appointments. I have things to do, but I have a very low sense of urgency hitting me. Now, that's by design, right? But when you get to what I call this a day ahead lifestyle, you're a better person, meaning that if somebody needs me for something, I'm available. Like it's easy to do. Like even if we had, I noticed you were very busy, when we first scheduled this up, I'm like, hey, let's just reschedule, Thursday. Sure. No problem. I put my schedule together. So I only do meetings typically on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So now I have a lot more time to stay in this a day ahead. But when you're a day ahead, you can be more helpful. You're not as rushed. There's lower anxiety, lower stress. And when people need your help, when the crises do occur, real crises, not kind of made up ones. And sometimes people try to push their urgency on you and it's not real. But in any case, for the real things, you can be there, right? I had this one client who's a friend, Phil. He's a veterinarian surgeon, and he was behind. And his biggest nemesis, he had a few things, but his biggest nemesis was his email. And he literally had 2,000 unprocessed, but need to be processed emails. Anyway, over a process of more than a year, we moved him from that state through the behind, caught up, ahead, a day. And now today, he tracks it every day, but he's around 20 to 30 emails in his inbox.
Amazing.
Instead of 2,000, right? And he went from the behindness to a day ahead. And so he's a better father because of that, right? He's a better family man. He's better for his clients. He's more happy. He's not as stressed or rushed. So that's an example of what can you do. Now, how do you get there? How does this work? What is the secret? So there's a couple of things. And when you're overwhelmed, one thing that you can start to do is you can do a mind dump, right? So a mind dump is just you getting a piece of paper out, right? Or a journal if you want to save it in one place. Get a journal or a piece of paper and you just mind dump. You just take everything that's in your head and you write it down on the paper. Right. And so you start with just the top of mind stuff. Oh, I got to do this today. I got to do that tomorrow. This is coming up and things will come and other things will be connected. And you have more. Okay. What about my business? What about this? And so for that framework, I have, like 100 prompts. Like we get it all out, right? Wow. Business, personal, financial. Now, if you were to just get it out, you would be left in the overwhelm state. Very dangerous, right? So like last time I did the full prompts, I had 463 items on the list.
Oh my gosh.
Right? That's like the weight of that is like very heavy, right? Very bad. So the key is that whenever you're going to do a mind dump, you have to leave time. Doesn't have to be a lot of time. Could be 5 minutes based on how much time you're going to mind up. Like if you're going to mind up for an hour, I'd give myself 15 minutes. So I'd mind up for 45 minutes and then I give 15 minutes to process the list. The list has to be processed to move you out of the overwhelm. But the one thing is once you get it out of your head on paper, which your brain thinks of as a safe place. Now, if you lose papers every day all the time, then it's not going to think it's a safe place. Then you're going to need a folder. I use bullet journals now, but initially I used a folder. So I just use paper, regular paper. But then I take my mind up list and I put them in a folder and then it was in a safe place. But once it's in a safe place, then your mind can let that go. And it's very free to have that happen. Okay. So processing the list. To process the list, when you process your mind dump, the processing of the list is based on some time frame, some time. So what I mean by that is that I'm doing a mind dump like for this next month. I'm doing a mind dump for a month. Or am I doing the mind dump for this week? My favorite time of the week, Friday afternoon at 2:00, because that's when I do what I create my self plan for the next week. And that's where I'm doing my mind dumping, but I'm doing my mind dump just for next week, right? Now, if things come out of my head, but my context is going to be for the next week, right? So if I'm doing that, I'm making my big list. I do this list. Let's say I have the 463 items. I'm going to go through the list and I'm going to use a nomenclature of N, D, S, or L. So N, I'm going to write an N next to anything that I could do now. Less than 5 minutes. It's things that take less than 5 minutes. Now, if you look at your list and you don't have enough ends or you have no ends, then you want to look at some of those things on your list and you want to chunk them down. You want to break them down so that they have a couple of ends, right? So if there's some like big project, maybe you say, I'm going to spend 5 minutes mind dumping about that project. So you want to make sure that you have some ends in there or add some ends. So that's things you can do now, less than 5 minutes. Then D stands for delegate. That's something that you may do it yourself, but it's delegatable to somebody else. Somebody else could do it. S is for schedule. Now, this is the key. You only put an S if it's something that needs to get done in the next week, like whatever your time context is, right? So when we do the super results day, we do a mind up just for that day. So if it's not to be scheduled for today, then you don't give it the S. So S means schedule for whatever time context the mind up was in. And then L stands for later or let go for now. So the later. So in the end, as you get better at this, a lot of it is later. And so when I did that list of 463, probably 400 of this stuff was later. It wasn't going to happen that month or that week, right? Now, when I do a mind up for one specific day, I do end up with a lot of N's and S's because I'm really focused in on what do I have to do for that day, right? But the key there is to focus. So then you can let go of most of the list. Then you schedule up your S's. You do a couple of ends to gain momentum. Like whenever you're feeling like any kind of resistance, let me do a quick end, 5 minutes. Let me do 2 ends, 10 minutes, boom, boom, boom. And that helps to kind of bring you out of the overwhelm. The other big key though is what we call the priority lens, right? So a lot of people have seen the Eisenhower matrix or Stephen Covey has the 4 quadrants where you have, importance and urgency, right? And a lot of times the things that are important and urgent, like you have to do right away. Then there's things that are important but not urgent.
Right.
That's what you really want to spend most of your time on, right? And then there's stuff that's urgent but not important. Other people are trying to get you to do that. And then if it's not important and not urgent, you probably shouldn't do it at all unless it's like watching TV to recover or something, So what happens though is most people that are overwhelmed, they're giving too much urgency to things that shouldn't be that urgent. And you have to make these hard decisions, but you get better at it. And so we call it the priority lens so that you start looking at things through a priority lens to figure out, have you heard of the 80-20 rule?
Yes.
So tell me what you think that rule is and if you really believe it.
I do really believe it, and it applies to everything in life. So 20% of your clients are usually going to be 80% of your revenue and where you're going to spend your time, et cetera, et cetera. So basically that 20% is like the most impactful and will give you the biggest bang for your buck in whatever quantifiable way you're slicing and dicing it.
100%. So this guy, they call it the Pareto principle as well. And this was this Italian philosopher, economic guy that figured out that, in Italy, 80% of the wealth was controlled by 20% of the people. But then when he went to his pea pod garden, he realized that 80% of the crops came from 20% of the seeds. And so anyway, all in life, it doesn't have to be exact numbers, but this kind of law of the 80-20 rule that there is the vital few and the trivial many, right? And if you really believe it, and most people do, if you realize 20% of what you do produces 80% of your results, if you only focused on the 20 and you just did twice as much of that, right? That would be 40% of your time. You produce 160% of the results and you still have 60% of your time free.
Wow.
So to say that more simply, if you'll focus in on the 20, I tell people you can cut out half of what you do and be doubly productive. Right.
Yeah.
But it's making hard choices. It's dropping things, right? Like I am a sucker for a shiny object. I've got to say no for the bigger yes. You've got to say no more and more and more and more. But anyway, a lot of that is using the priority lens, getting real clear on where do you want to be? What's your destination? You're going from point A to point B, but what's your point B? Really dial that in, really figure that out. So getting that priority straight. Then the last part of coming out of the overwhelm is the implementation, right? You talked about this before. And so we have a framework that we can unpack now, if you'd like, called the 30-minute hour. So the 30-minute hour is how to get an hour's worth of stuff done in just 30 minutes. How can you compress time and get stuff done? So if you want, we can talk into that. That's also one of my favorite frameworks.
Yeah, let's talk about that. And then honestly, you could give us a masterclass all day, but I want to leave a little bit of a teaser. So let's talk about the 30-minute hour, and then we'll move on from there and figure out how people can get your tools and resources and learn how to work with you and all of that.
Sure. Okay. So the 30-minute hour, this is one of the most powerful frames of all. And so it's so powerful that I have to make sure that it's used for good and not for evil.
Wow.
Right? All right. So let's say that you and let's say we had 4 30-minute hours in a row. So basically that means we got 4 hours of stuff done in just 2 hours. So that's going to leave us 2 hours of guilt-free time to do whatever we want. But here's the catch. It cannot be work, right? So if I were to ask you, I'll tell you my answer. But if I were to ask you if you had 2 guilt-free hours that can't be work, what would you do? So for me, I love connecting with my kids. They're out of the nest. So I'd probably reach out to them, connect with them. I love going out for hikes. I live in Phoenix. So I love going out in nature, go for a hike. I love my Peloton bike, ride that every day. Probably do a Peloton bike ride. And I also like connecting with old friends, typically back from my college days. So I might do a little bit of that. If I had 2 guilt-free hours, that's what I would do. What about you? If you had 2 guilt-free hours, what would you do?
Ooh, if I had 2 guilt-free hours, I would probably go on a walk, like take an hour of that to go on a walk with a friend, just to get outside and get our bodies moving while catching up, because that time seems to be far and few between, especially my friends and I tend to have kids in the middle school to high school age. So we're very busy being parents on top of our jobs. It leaves very little time for that connection. So I do that. I would read a book for fun, maybe hit up an extra Pilates class, because I find myself having to cancel them sometimes just to make sure I'm getting all the work stuff done I need to get done. I organize my house before my parents arrive from Thailand next month. Yeah, I have a huge list of things I would do if I had an extra 2 hours.
That's perfect. Now, we're going to give you those 2 hours, but the key is for you, and I hope the listeners, I hope you guys have thought about what you were going to do, is that's what I want you to take some of this time, because we're all type A people. And, if we get that extra 30 minutes, we're just going to do more work. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to use some of this for those things you mentioned: self-care, connection with people, getting yourself organized, going to the Pilates class, all that stuff. I want you to use that. It's a powerful framework. And again, this is a framework where, like we said, everything at self-fluence, everything you need is within reach. You're already doing it. That's a key. And you can master it if you decide. So what I did is I figured out what was the most productive day of the year. Now, there's a day of the year where people get 3 to 10 times more stuff done than a normal day. Now, that's 3x to 10x. We're only looking for 2x. So this is going to be very easy, actually. Some people have this day more than once throughout the year, but there's a day where people are 3 to 10 times more productive than their ordinary day. Do you know what day of the year that is?
I don't.
Okay, so this is going to be very self-evident. All the listeners are going to be, oh, yes. Okay, so it's actually the day before vacation.
Oh, okay.
Think about this. The day before vacation, people get 3 to 10 times as much stuff done than they do on a normal day. Now, I realized that was my most productive day as well. And so what I did is I started studying people on the day before vacation. Now, I don't like the stress of the day before vacation, right? But what happened is I looked at it, we studied it, and we figured out why it was so productive. And I created a little acronym that's very easy to remember, and it's PDF, right? PDF. And so when I say PDF, people kind of know what that is. We say, hey, email me the PDF. I'm going to print out the PDF. So it's a very easy acronym. Now, in the tech world, that stands for portable document format. That's not what it is here. That's not what it's here. But when you think of the 30-minute hour, I want you to think of day before vacation, PDF. And PDF stands for plan, delegate, focus. And so what happens is, let me unpack each one of those so people can have these 30-minute hours. Plan, delegate, focus. So the first one is plan. So what happens is on the day before vacation, that is a day that you really plan out, right? I love next day planning. I never let a day end without planning the next one. But next day planning, you really plan it out. So if you want to have some 30-minute hours, plan your day more. I like to do it the night before so that when I wake up, I'm ready to go. But next day planning, typically on the day before vacation, people wake up 30 to 60 minutes earlier. Now, I'm not saying you're going to do that every day, but if you want to have a 30-minute hour tomorrow, you wake up 30 minutes earlier. Now you've got 30 minutes extra in your day, right? So waking up early, again, that's what people were doing on the day before vacation. The other thing is they have a very clear vision about what has to get done before you go on vacation. Like you're like, this has to get done. This doesn't have to get done. This has to get done. These things have to get done. And so creating that list of what has to be done and then looking at that stuff, it keeps you on track more during the day by planning that out, having a very clear vision for the day. And the other thing, we talked about it, was as I studied the people on the day before vacation, they use the 80-20 rule. They are focusing in on the 20% that move the needle, that makes a difference, and they're ousting the 80. Right? They're ousting it. They're getting rid of the 8 that only produces 20% of the results. And they are what? They are deferring and delegating. So P is planning. Second one is D, stands for delegate and defer. So what happens on the day before vacation, you're deferring stuff. You're delegating stuff away, stuff that doesn't have to be done. I do in my day ahead lifestyle, I do what I call proactive procrastination is I look at a list of what I could do today and I say, does that really have to be done today? It doesn't. Push it out to tomorrow. Now, if I push something out like 3, 4, 5 days in a row, people would call that procrastination. But that thing's not that important if I'm able to keep doing that. Now, if it's a deadline, like I have to write an article or something for a deadline, then it's going to raise its priority and it'll be there. But deferring the stuff that's not as important as other stuff that you could be doing, that's that 80-20 rule. And they're doing that on the day before vacation. The other thing on the day before vacation is they ask who before do. So that's a little saying I like, who before do. They ask, who could go do this before I go do it? And on the day before vacation, they're thinking, well, who else could do that? I can't do it. I'm leaving. Someone else has to do it. And you're setting up systems and people to do things when you go away. Well, do that more often, right? Bring some of that back into your regular day and really kind of defer stuff. So planning, deferring. And then the last one where I personally get my most 30-minute hours is focus. On the day before vacation, you have this weird, very powerful, fierce focus. Think of all the things that you don't do. Day before vacation, no idle chit chat, no internet surfing, no long email responses. And guess what? You don't look at the shiny objects much on the day before vacation. You don't have time for that, right? You got the blinders on. You're going for that stuff. And so the other big thing is, are you a James Bond movie fan?
Sure.
Okay. So do you know the very first James Bond movie came out May of 1963. Do you know the very first James Bond movie?
Oh gosh, I do not. Is it in Her Majesty's Service, Secret Service? I don't know, something like that.
No, but you said it, but you didn't know it. And it was Dr. No. So the very first James Bond movie was Dr. No. And the reason I say that is because on the day before vacation, people become Dr. No. Like for me, Blaine, can you do this? Blaine, can you do that? No, 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 no. Like no is my default response. And so the day before vacation, if you want to have more 30-minute hours, you've got to say no more. You've got to become Dr. No. Now, what happens if you're not Dr. No? Then you have the 90-minute hour. And the 90-minute hour is the worst because that's where someone asks for an hour of your time and it takes 90 minutes. Or someone says, could you just give me 10 minutes of your time? And it takes 30 minutes, right? I proactively, no is my first, no, I have to check my schedule. No, no, no. I want that to be your method of operation is to default to the no. Okay. What else happens with your focus? You tend to stay on schedule more during the day before vacation, and you tend to remind yourself by the use of timers. So instead of just on the day before vacation, I use timers all the time. And I just tell Siri, I've got iPhone and Apple Watch. I tell Siri to set a timer, right? So if I'm going to do internet research, I better set the timer, right? Wow. Otherwise I could be sucked in there for hours. So I'll do 30 minutes or, I just need to check my email. Oh yeah, right. Check your email, look out. That's a rabbit hole, right? And so again, I'm going to set maybe only 15 minutes for that, right? Or I'll even set the timer to make phone calls. So I'm using timers all throughout the day. And then the last part of the focus and where I personally get my most hours is that on the day before vacation, people just like that day, poof, they become masters of tasking. Now, tasking has three concepts: single tasking, multitasking, which gets a bad rap sometimes, and batch tasking. But single tasking has allowed me to have the most 30-minute hours that have come from single tasking. Now, what is single tasking? Single tasking is where you work on a single task with no distractions whatsoever. Now, this is tough for some people, but this means like when I go into single tasking mode, I have to literally turn my phone completely off. I turn my phone completely. Now I know if I try to boot it up, it's going to take time. So that's enough for me. Some people, that's not even enough. They have to turn their phone off and put it in a different room. Or ask their partner or spouse to hide their phone or take their phone. So you do whatever you have to do. But for me, I turn my phone off and I only open up one window and there's no rings, dings, or bings or notifications in any way whatsoever. Actually, I got to the point where on my phone never makes a noise. So my family's not too happy about it. Like if they call me, I might not get it. Or if they text me, might not respond right away. But I have no rings, dings, or bings in my life. Back to the single focus. When I do that, I can get an hour's worth of article writing done in just 30 minutes because I'm not interrupted and I'm totally focused in on that. Now, when you first start this, you're going to have the monkey mind. I'm writing this article, but I'm thinking, I got to buy this gift. Oh, my daughter asked me to do this. Oh, this, that. Pop, 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 pop. Yeah. The monkey mind is going to try to sabotage your single focus. So what you do is in that moment, you just grab a piece of paper. I have a scrap paper on my desk here. Just write it down. It takes a second. Capture it. Don't let it go. Don't force it. Bring it into your consciousness. Write it down and then go right back. Don't think about it. Don't brainstorm. Just capture the thought on a piece of paper, or you could use your phone. You can tell Siri to take a note, but whatever seconds, and then go back to what you're doing. And what happened for me over time is the monkey mind quieted down and it got used to this is the time. Right. And I also use Endel as an app I use that creates personal soundscapes, basically noises and music for focus. So my monkey mind knows, okay, time for me to take a nap. Blaine, put that music on. So that's the key to the single task. And the more you do that, the better off you get at it. Right. And that can bring a lot of 30-minute hours can come from that. So the second thing is multitasking. Sometimes it gets a bad rap, but for me, multitasking, when you do two things at the same time, right, without sacrificing the quality of either one. So I can't do this podcast and do my email at the same time. Right. That's low quality on both. But can I go for a walk and listen to your podcast? Yes, I can. Can I ride my Peloton bike, exercise, and listen to the podcast? Yes. Can I drive an automobile and talk on my cell phone? Yes. I have hands-free cell phone thing. Yes. I can do those things without sacrificing the quality. So whenever my hands are busy, I try to turn my mind into something else. Or where can I overlay two things? So I'm double dipping, right? That's multitasking. For example, I love exercise, but I love family time. So I taught my kids how to play tennis, my sport of choice. So if we went out for 30 minutes of tennis, I also got 30 minutes of family time in there. So I got an hour's worth of stuff done in just 30 minutes. So I'm looking for the synergies inside the multitasking. And then the last one is batch tasking. That's just where you batch stuff together. And so on the day before vacation, if you have 3 errands, you don't run an errand, come home, run an errand. No, you batch it together, go out, run all the errands efficiently and come back. That batching works for phone calls, emails, computer time, meetings, anything where you can batch it together. Sometimes I'll tell people, look, when you get to the office, say from 9 to 11, I'm going to be in single task mode. Don't come in here unless the place is on fire. Don't come in this room because I need to work on these things. And I also say, why don't you go work on your single tasking stuff? But then at 11 o'clock, I'm going to come out for 20 minutes of whatever questions you were going to ask me. Right. Mm-hmm. And so there I batched my interruptions into that little like office hours time, right? My wife and I, we used to text each other and interrupt each other all day long until we realized, wait a second, on the iPhone, we can have a shared note where we can add stuff to the note, but there's no notifications from it. So then when we have lunch together or whatever, we go look at the note. Oh, okay, you added this, I didn't want to forget to tell you that or this. Mm-hmm. And so again, we batch our interruptions into that note. Okay, so overarching 30-minute hour, day before vacation, PDF, plan, delegate, focus. And the other overarching thing that happens on the day before vacation was people released their inner perfectionist. They released their inner perfectionist. Done was better than perfect because of the deadline, because I'm leaving. Done is better than perfect. And if you'll do that, done is better than perfect, right? And let some things go. You take care of the important stuff, right? But release that inner perfectionist. It can happen. And then give yourself a nice reward, right? So at the end of some 30-minute hours, just like going on vacation, have some reward for yourself. And it can be, like you said, going for a 15-minute walk, listening to a nice audiobook, something like that. But anyway, that is the 30-minute hour.
Wow. I'm very inspired, and I'm happy that I'm already instituting some of these on smaller scales. It's helping me realize this is very achievable. So if I'm already starting with a few things, I can just do it with a few more things every day.
I would say dialing in the single tasking mode, that's been a game changer. And people are missing, there's a whole book called Deep Work, but people are losing the ability to really focus in. Yeah. And like I said, the monkey mind's there, but as you mind capture those things and quiet it down, you become way more efficient. And it helps you to move from the behind to caught up to ahead to a day ahead.
I have so much more we could talk about, but in the interest of time, Blaine, what is the easiest place for people to find and follow you?
Yeah, the easiest thing is just go to BlaineTEDx.com. So BlaineTEDx.com. Nice. There you can opt in. I did a TEDx talk. You get to watch the talk. I gave you a transcript. And I talk about this thing called White Table. What you think about, you bring about. That's a little acronym I made. But I talk about how to kind of, whatever your main goal in life is, how to remind yourself of that goal in a very simple, elegant way, let's say 60 to 100 times a day. And so it's kind of a cool little mind hack. But anyway, once you do that, though, you'll have my email address. We'll be connected. You'll find out when I'm doing events. I send you some articles. Then we're connected. If I can serve you or help you in any way, would love to do it.
Great. Thank you so much. Just a really refreshing, lovely conversation. I love how passionate you are about this and everything that you're talking about, all these systems and processes that you've developed. You came up with the new ways, right, to present information to us that we all should know. But again, we get caught up in all the things that we're doing. And so we're not doing them as efficiently as we could be. So Blaine, I really appreciate you taking this time to share with our entrepreneurs and small businesses who are listening some of your tips and tricks. I can't wait to go check out all of the things that I haven't checked out yet and get on your list because I don't think I'm on it yet and use them myself. And is there any last thought, a mantra, a quote, a verse that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Yeah, let me leave you with this. The bad news is time flies. The good news, you're the pilot. So pilot well, like goes quick.
Mic drop right there. Again, thank you so much. And to our audience, thank you for listening. I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert. Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.